All right, so our featured speaker for today is a 10-time bracelet winner. He needs no introduction, obviously. Everyone knows who Doyle is. He's the most famous poker player in the world times 10. 10-time World Series of Poker bracelet winner, 2-time world champion, a dear friend, and a cancer survivor himself. Everyone, please, a round of applause for Doyle Brunson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Doyle, I said before, this is my Barbara Walters moment, so I'm a little nervous too. It's hard to get started with a career that's lasted 50 years. Two-time world champion, 1977, 1976, 10-time bracelet winner. You're only one behind Phil Hellmuth. It looked like Phil was going to get his 12th, which would have made me change his presentation to 12 ways for a better no-limit hold'em. But you've done everything in the game, and yet you've been able to stay on top for more than 50 years. What's the key in your mind to staying at the top of the game for that long?
Well, I think you got to just be pretty lucky to have good genes, and I've come from a long line of livers on my mother's side, especially. Most of them live to be in their 90s, and some of them into their hundreds. And I've always tried to stay mentally alert, and I love to play, so I never stop playing. And I just think I'm, exceedingly fortunate.
Yeah, well, I mean, longevity is one thing, but I think everyone's interested in what it takes as a poker player to keep sharp as the game has changed. We've seen tremendous changes in the game as it's become more popular, and televised poker has really hit, the first year that you played in the World Series of Poker, how many players played?
6.
6. 6, okay. And this year, there'll be more than 6,000, pretty clear. And, but the point is, you've seen the game change tremendously over the years, and yet you're still an extremely formidable opponent, one of the best in the game. How have you been able to keep up and stay with the game as it's progressed and players have gotten better?
Well, I've always been a person that played the person that I was against more than the new wave of poker, where they got everything figured out mathematically and the proper procedure. I kind of try to get inside my opponent's head and think what he's thinking, and it's been working for me, so I'm not going to change.
Yeah, it's been working for you. Over $6 million in career tournament winnings, including, like I said, those 10 bracelets, but also a World Poker Tour championship you won a few years back. How important was that WPT win to you in the whole scheme of everything you've done in poker?
Well, it was important, I think, because at that time it was the largest field that was ever assembled in a poker tournament. And, I'd received a lot of heat because in the early World Series of Poker, the fields weren't that big. But we weren't really concentrating on trying to win bracelets. We were just trying to bring people out for the cash games. And so...
So it was a little bait and switch. Get them in for the bracelets and then fleece them after?
Well, that's exactly what it was. And, I only played 2 events a year for a number of years. Instead of, I see some of these guys playing, I don't know, 40 or 50 events in these things, and I don't know how they do it. 2 people come to mind, is Daniel Negreanu and Barry Greenstein.
Right.
And every time I look up, they're in the tournament.
Sometimes 2 or 3 at the same time.
2 or 3 at the same time. And I don't know if it's my age or my mentality, but I just don't think I could do that. I mean, I love to play the cash games, and I've only entered 2 this year at the World Series here. I plan on playing the rest of the $10,000 events. Okay,
very good. You mentioned that in the first year of the World Series, there were only 6 people. Now, people may not know, there actually wasn't a tournament that year. It was just 3 or 4 days of play, and then you guys elected who they thought was the best overall player. And the winner of that competition or that election was?
Johnny Moss.
Johnny Moss. Johnny Moss was elected the first world champion of poker. Who would be elected today? If the same procedure were in place, who do you think would be elected as the world champion?
Well, I think the consensus probably is Phil Ivey. I haven't played that much with Phil, and the few times I have played with him, I've never seen him loser. So I don't know how he reacts when he gets loser, because he never gets loser. But I think he's probably the consensus pick right now, I would say.
If Chip Reese were alive today, would Chip replace Phil as your pick?
As the all-around poker player, Chip Reese was the best I've ever seen.
What made him so good?
His demeanor, his composure, the fact that we talked about it. He said, my A game's not any better than a lot of people, and maybe not quite as good. He said, but my D game is almost as good as my A game. And I think that explained it pretty well. He was always in control of himself, and he was a natural game player. And what killed him, incidentally, a lot of people don't know it, he had rheumatic fever when he was a kid, and he stayed out of school for a year and did nothing but play games. And so that he developed a game plan mentality, and I know that he was the best all-around game player. I mean, like backgammon, chess, all the different card games. I mean, he was phenomenal.
So the election were held today, you'd vote for Chip, and I think a lot of other people would as well. The Hall of Fame. I know a lot is, you get a vote, obviously, as a former world champion and as an inductee. Who's not in the Hall of Fame that should be, in your opinion?
That's a tough question. There's a lot of deserving players. I think that they put the age limit to 40 now. I'd have to see a list to pick out of the group that I would think. But I know there's a lot of them that I think are deserving. Okay. I can't right offhand. I don't know.
Not willing to name names. Talk about, I know that in 1960 you got married to Louise, and still married. She's a lovely woman. I've had an opportunity to spend some time with you guys over the years. Talk about Louise and what it takes for a woman to stand behind a gambler that's seen the swings and the ups and downs that you've seen throughout your career.
Well, Louise, I think she's probably the most remarkable person I've ever known. She can get upset over little things, but when it comes to big things, she handles them amazingly well. And we first started going together, she didn't know I was a gambler. I think I told her, it was a story in the book, and why I didn't tell her I was a poker player, I don't know, but I told her I was a bookmaker when I met her.
Oh, that's a lot better.
And she thought she was acquainted with my academic background, which I had a master's degree and so forth to be a teacher, and a business degree, and she thought that I was a bookkeeper. and
Not the bookmaker.
Yeah, and so literally, I mean, I like to use the term she was square as an apple box, but. We went together for several months, and with her thinking that, and then I guess we were in love by then, and then actually the FBI raided our house, and at that point she found out what a bookmaker was. She wasn't there, by the way. It was a fellow named Sailor Roberts and myself.
Talk a little, wow. I didn't expect that one. And do you talk to her about wins and losses? Does she care? Like you come home, I lost 150,000 today, I won 200,000 today. Does she care, or do you talk about that stuff?
She can't handle it. We watched a basketball game, Jack Binion and myself and her one time. I remember we had $40,000 bet on it. And she was an absolute nervous wreck by the time it was over. And ever since then, I don't give her any specifics. I know it's kind of hard. One time I lost 350,000 at the Bellagio. I went home, been up all night, and she said, "Well, let's get some breakfast before you go to bed." And I said, "Okay." We went to IHOP, and they had some blintzes that we ordered along with some eggs, I think, and she wanted a half order. I said, "Okay." Well, we ordered a half order, and they brought out a big plate of them, And after we got them, she said, "Let me see that check." She said, "I just wanted a half order." She said, "Here they've charged $7 or something for the." And she complained about that $7 check all the way home, and I had to listen to it. So that's one of the pitfalls that you just have to put up with it.
Did you tell her about the 350?
No.
I can't imagine why.
She is a very conservative lady, by the way.
Yeah. In 1962, she was pregnant, and you were diagnosed shortly thereafter, I believe, with a tumor in your neck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had my brother had just died with cancer, and it started the same way. I had a little knot right here on my neck, and I started taking antibiotics for it, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And finally, the doctor said, "Well, I think we better take that out." He said, "I don't think we're going to have any problem with it, but it needs to come out." So I was in Fort Worth, Texas at the time, and they took me into surgery. I was in surgery for 8 hours, and it was melanoma, and it was advanced, and they sewed me back up. And I talked to him. I said, he told me to get my affairs in order. I said, "Well, did you get it all?" And he said, "No." I said, I can never forget the words. He said, "Melanoma is like a black corruption. You can see it with your naked eye." He said, "We kept taking slides, naturally." He says, "But it had progressed up towards your brain and down. It was everywhere." He said, "So, we sewed you up." And, well, what are you going to do? Louise was pregnant with our first child, and she said, "Well, is there any way that I can keep him alive until the baby comes? I would really like for him to see the baby." She was about 3 months pregnant. And the doctor said, "Well, they have MD Anderson in Houston. They sometimes have drugs that keep people alive and so forth." And so she insisted that we go there. And so I rested for 2 weeks. I went to MD Anderson, which is a wonderful place, by the way. It's in Houston. There's blocks and blocks of hospitals and clinics and so forth, and they specialize in cancer. And they put me on the operating table and did another operation, a radical neck. They took out all the lymph nodes, some flesh in here. But the amazing part of it was that the cancer had disappeared. And I said, "Well," I told the doctor, I said, "Well, it wasn't there to begin with. You made a mistake." And he said, "No, we sent off and we got the slides and everything." He said, "Sometimes we send 1 or 2 cases of spontaneous remission. We can't, no explanation for it." And as opposed to most people today, I'm a Christian, and we had massive prayer groups going around the country, a lot of them in Catholic schools. I'll never forget, there was a friend of mine had a little girl that was about a 3rd grader. She had organized prayer sessions in her school and several other Catholic schools. Even I was a Baptist, but and she kept calling my wife and saying, "Don't worry, he's going to be okay." And and anyway, I was from Texas in the heart of the Bible country, and had a lot of prayers going up for me. And all I can tell you is it went away. And people can make any kind of explanation they want. I kind of feel like it was some kind of intervention from God. I don't know. I don't know why He would want me to be around anyway. But I'm still here, and thank you. And then I had another little bout. I had a lipoma in my neck. And because they wouldn't give me any pain medicine in MD Anderson because they said that I might need it later on. And so consequently, we went to Santa Barbara. And they felt around there and they did tests. They did all kind of, I had a stack of papers that high, you know. And I finally asked the doctor, I said, well, have you taken many of these things out? And he said, yeah, I did one time. He said, it wasn't as big as that one. I said, well, excuse me, but I'm going down to MD Anderson. So I went to MD Anderson. I had a stack of stuff. The doctor cut me in. I said, Dr. Ballantyne, here's the tests and everything they did on me. He took them, kind of threw them on his desk, sat down in the chair. He said, a minute. He felt around on my neck and everything. And he said, well, I'll take care of you tomorrow. I said, I don't think it's malignant. I said, well, do you want to see the test? He said, no. And I said, well, have you ever done any of these? I do 2 or 3 a week. And so I came out fine out of that one. And then again, about 6 months ago, I went for a checkup at the dermatologist. And I just had a spot on my arm here. And he said, what is that? And I thought it was where the dog had hit me, and it had bled underneath the skin. It was just blue. I told him that. And so he said, well, we better take it out anyway, so it should be healed by now. He cut it out, and it was melanoma again. So I said, well, I'm going to MD Anderson. And so I got down there, and I went in, and I was sitting there, and this doctor came in, and he was laughing. I said, well, what's so funny, Doc? And he said, well, I've got your chart here. He said, you were here 48 years ago, and you were expected to live 3 months, and here you are again. And I said, yeah, here I am. And so anyway, they operated on me, and they cut a big incision here and took out a lot of flesh here, and I haven't had any more problem with that. So I'm very appreciative of MD Anderson and any cancer donations that I hopefully some of it gets to MD Anderson because they do a wonderful job down there.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
So maybe the third time's the charm.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. After having survived 3 bouts, do you have any words of advice to people that might be going through similar things or have family members that might be going through similar things?
Well, I think in the words of what Jim Valvano, he said, just don't give up, just don't ever give up. And, you know, you need to have regular checkups and listen to your doctors. And if my recommendation doesn't mean anything, you go to Texas to MD Anderson.
I was about to say the same thing. All right, wow. What makes a professional poker player a pro?
He makes his living that way.
There are different ways to make a living as a pro these days. Can you elaborate any more on, you know, like you say, oh, that guy's a pro, that guy calls himself a pro. What's the difference?
Well, I guess the guy that calls himself a pro, he does make his living. I think you have to make 100% of your living playing poker to really be a poker pro. You know, there's all these youngsters, you know, they come out in different like attack mode than we did back, even I'm sure when you first started playing that, you know, they start with money management and all this mathematic stuff and, you know, when to quit and when to play. I never did that. I just kind of played just by my gut and just played when I thought the game was right or if I felt good. And I think most of the players do that, especially the old timers. I don't take anything away from the kids because, as you know, there's some brilliant kids out there. But they're different than the old pros, I think, a little bit.
Well, they're different in their money management skills and the mathematical approach to the game. But I guess that leads me to my next question. If you took the world champion Doyle Brunson from 1976 and 1977, and you transplanted the guy that was playing that game to the World Championship coming up in the main event. Could that Doyle Brunson win today?
Oh, I think definitely, because I think I was a little ahead of my time. I'll put it that way. I think that back then I was about where these kids are now today, maybe even more so, because I didn't pay as much attention to. I've always said a poker player should be a psychologist, and if you can tune in to your opponent, a lot of that other stuff goes away.
Mathematics become less important.
Yeah, and I think that I was fortunate enough to be very skilled in that, and I might have lost a little of it, but not much. I don't think you're going to see anybody over 40 win this tournament out here. It's just too grueling, 8 days of steady play, and it's tough on an older guy, especially when you're almost 80.
But you're still buying in.
Yeah, I'm still going to try.
So over the course of the 8 days that this World Championship will play out, when do you get tired? Like, you're going to be one of the oldest competitors in the field, obviously the most experienced, but when do you start feeling it these days? Day 2, day 3, more?
I don't really. I was an athlete when I was young, and I think I did develop a great stamina. And I think I really don't think the fatigue factor is going to get me. It's more of having to jump too many hurdles because everybody wants to beat me.
Right.
And and this, okay, I'm all in. Well, you just, sooner or later, somebody's going to get you. And they don't make that play against most players. I don't mean how many times I've heard, well, I know you got the best hand, but I've always wanted to break you. Boom, here they come. And it's hard to get through that, just over and over and over.
Yeah. I think, I've experienced some of the same thing to a much lesser degree, obviously, and some of the other well-known pros I know have run into that as well. But they're also, they're people that play too many pots against you because they want to beat you, but they're also the opposite, where they're just scared to death of you, and every time you raise, they fold. I assume that's a kind of opponent you want to play against.
I don't see that very often. You think you would? You think it's a two-edged sword because you get to pick up chips easily sometimes? Right. But for some reason, nobody seems to be afraid, because most of them have read the book, and they always think I'm bluffing. And so consequently, I get a lot of loose action, but like I say, you just have to win. It's a minefield. Every pot, yeah. Yeah. Talking about your book, one of the first books, in fact, the first poker book that I ever read, Super System, still considered, one of the best poker texts out there. How did you come about writing that book? It seems like, that wouldn't be something you want to give away all your secrets, especially at a time when you were dominating every game and couldn't be beat. Well, that was kind of a two-edged sword. I did get a lot of criticism from the other pros, but in retrospect, it made so many more players, that were, it really wasn't that competitive. There was only, I'd say maybe 50 real top pros in the world. And, they were scattered and everything. Most of us were in the South. And I don't know, it came up, they wanted me to write a book in Doubleday, and some of them came around, and being the shrewd businessman that I am, which is a joke, by the way, is that I told them that I'd heard so many horror stories about the royalties and everything that I said, well, I'll write the book and I'll publish it. And you can publish it, but I'll have it printed and you can buy them from me. And they wouldn't do that. So I said, well, okay, I'll just start my own publishing company, which I did. And we wrote the book, and $400,000 later, that I was in the hole. We took over a year to writing it. We did put a lot of work into that, in that first Super System, and I'm glad I wrote it because, like I say, it really did help the game. It made good players out of mediocre players, and if you were already a good player, it made a really good player out of you. So it leveled, excuse me, it leveled the playing field a lot, but again, it increased the popularity.
Yeah, I assume that a lot of people in the room. How many people in the room have read Super System? That's amazing, Doyle. Think about that. Think about that. Nearly 3/4 of the audience. That's an amazing accomplishment. And Super System 2, the update to Super System came out recently.
It's mostly the Hold'em section. The other sections are different. The Hold'em section is essentially the same with a few different variations simply because I still believe now as I believed then, and so I didn't change very much. The biggest change is that we used to call the turn the flop.
Really?
Yes.
What was the flop called?
The turn. The flop, there was the turn, 4th Street and 5th Street.
Okay.
And then the terminology changed to the flop, the turn, and the river.
You're just trying to confuse people?
No, that was what we called it. And so
Okay.
in the second Super System, I changed it to the local jargon. I mean, what we
Right.
call it today, because that kind of confused people a little bit back in those days. I still say it sometimes. I turned a straight. You see, but I meant I flopped a straight.
Right.
And that's what we called it for 30 years.
Do you remember the first hand of Texas Hold'em you ever played?
I actually do.
When was it? I'm sure everyone would love to hear that story.
It was in Granbury, Texas. It was a bootlegger's house. And he was running the game, and he was kind of the mark, and he explained the game to us, and he dealt it, and I just caught on right away that you need big cards, and as opposed to where it seemed like a lot of the players, for why I don't know, couldn't comprehend that, and so I was successful with it right away, and then when it became the game of choice, Sailor Robertson, Amarillo Slim, and myself were on the road, and we dealt out hands. That was before the computers, and we would put the hands out, and we would just deal out literally thousands of hands, trying to figure out the odds on, like making a flush. We had it figured out pretty close. The odds on a pair against a pair, and everything that everybody knows now, but nobody knew then.
Right.
And so we were ahead of our time quite a ways for a number of years.
And so you and Slim and Sailor traveled around by car around Texas and Oklahoma and the rest of the Southeast?
Alabama, Louisiana, yeah.
And you're just looking for the mark and...
Well, it wasn't that so much. It was kind of a nucleus of pros, I'd say maybe 10 or 12 that would go to different towns. Now, they all knew us, but every town had a group of guys that wanted to play with us. So we'd say, well, where are we going to play next week? Well, Odessa or Louisiana or Oklahoma City. And we would meet there, and the local players would come in and play with us. And we had built up a good reputation of being honest and taking care of things and no troubles and everything, except for the hijackings. We did get robbed a lot. We got cheated pretty often. We got arrested many times.
How many times have you been arrested?
I lost count. People ask me, and they say, in the old days, did they want to take a picture with you like they do today? I said, yeah, they took my picture, but they fingerprinted me right after. But it kind of got to the point where we were given false names, and we just pay a fine and leave. I know I went for licensing in 1978 in front of the Gaming Control Board, and they asked me about how many times I've been arrested, and I said, well, I really don't know. And they said, well, you got to find out because we have to. So I went back to Fort Worth, and they had thrown it all away. They said, we don't keep these misdemeanors on record, but just so many years, and everything, and never charged with a felony. It was always just a misdemeanor for gambling. And it got to the point to where I think it was actually the bail bondsman and the policeman got into cahoots, I think, because we got it a lot.
Yeah. You said hijackings. These are like people just like.
With guns, yes.
With guns.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen any true horrible violence at the table?
Yeah, I've seen 2 people killed at the table. I've seen 5 people die at the table, counting the 2 that were shot. We were playing on Exchange Avenue in a lowball game. It was 50 cents and $1. I'll never forget. And 2 tables, and the guy just walked up to this, not to my table, to the table right next to me, and just put a gun, just shot the guy. And I remember the gore that went all over the wall, and there was a back door, and we all ran out the back door, and the creek was back there. I can remember how cold that creek was as we were running away because we didn't want to be there be a witness. And
what was it over?
I think it was over a woman.
Yeah.
And another time in Alabama, a guy came in. I think this was over a woman, and he just blew the guy's head off with a shotgun, and it was pretty gory. And but we were. I've been robbed. I think a total of 5 times in my life. That
doesn't sound too bad. Once every 10 years or so. I would think it'd be a lot higher.
But it was a threat every game. I mean, it's fun to talk about it now, and why I did it, I don't know. I mean, it sounds pretty stupid now, but we played in places they actually had a machine gun on top of the place we were playing to protect it.
A machine gun?
A machine gun, a 50 caliber machine gun. And most places, you know, we tried to protect ourselves. That was the main reason for our partnership, that we would go places together, you know, and kind of watch each other's back. But I saw Slim in there a while ago.
I just saw him walking down the hall, yeah.
He don't look too good, does he? No, I think he's gone through 3 or 4 pacemakers, and he's had some bad health.
Yeah. You've got a lot of colorful stories about the old days. But if someone like myself were to ask you your favorite poker story to tell of all time, what would it be?
Oh man, I don't know. I think maybe the World Poker Tour Championship might have been one of my most memorable because I was actually thinking about retiring at the time, and I went to Montana. We got a place in Montana, and I went up and I was thinking about it, and I said, no, I said, I still feel pretty good. I think this was when 2005, I think. And so I went down to the Legends of Poker at the Bicycle Club, and like I say, it was the biggest field that was ever assembled at that time, and played really well, and I won it. And I kind of go by results. I think I've had one losing year in my life, and I think as long as I have winning years, I think I'll keep playing.
Yeah, you were quoted as saying, "You don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing."
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you're still playing, planning on playing a couple more events at this World Series and the championship as well?
As soon as I leave here, I'm going to a cash game.
Where are the big cash games in Vegas these days? I know it's migrated around town. It used to be Bellagio. Before that, who knows? You know, Mirage. Where's the big cash game happening?
It's mostly at the Bellagio.
Okay.
They moved to the REA for a period of a few months, but it's back at the Bellagio. It's my favorite place to play.
What makes the Bellagio poker room so great?
Well, they've got Bobby's room back there, where it's more private, and plus they treat us very well, and it's just comfortable, and it's just always it's the Old Dunes Hotel where I played when I first came to Las Vegas.
And when you leave today, how big will the game be that you're going to play?
I think it's 1,000 and 2,000 limit, which is not nearly as big as it used to be, but the economy and plus Black Friday kind of knocked it sideways.
Yeah.
And that's big enough. It's big enough to be interesting.
Big enough to be interesting, yeah. And what's a typical winning or losing session kind of average, if you could think of it that way?
I think in this particular game, I think probably 100,000.
100,000. And are there any of the young internet kids playing in that?
They are playing. That's what makes it so nice.
I'm sorry. You may not be willing to mention names now that you've just kind of said that, but who are the internet kids that are playing in the game now that big?
Well, there's a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
I know Scott Seaver. He just won a tournament here, by the way. I mean, all these kids that are playing they were great on the internet, but it remains to be seen whether they can play live poker and be great. Obviously, they've all got tons of talent. Most of them are very well educated. It's amazing, how many of them have got degrees from colleges. But there's just tons of them. And the Brunson 10 was a group. But that was Amit, I can't pronounce his name, and Donnie Stern, and Chris Moorman, the great Ansky, whatever the heck his name is. But I mean, they were all great players. They still lack a little bit at the table, though. They still are not really comfortable because it's a little bit different game, and they have a few tells that they'll work their way out of them pretty quickly. 'Cause, I mean, they're all talented kids.
You work their way. You work them out of
I'll help
out of
them,
pretty
yeah.
quickly, yeah. Do you like playing poker on the internet? I mean, I know it's not possible right now, but I know that you were playing, right?
Not very much.
Not very much.
I
Did you enjoy it when you were playing?
I truthfully didn't.
No?
These guys that play these long sessions, if I play a couple hours, I get bored, and I can't help it. I couldn't trust the internet completely. I didn't ever go up to the real big games. I know that the sites tried to be honest, and most of them were, but obviously sometimes things go wrong. And I just couldn't see playing for hundreds of thousands of dollars on the internet. I couldn't. So I think you should stay at your whatever level you're comfortable with. If if you want to take a shot and lose $1 million, well, go ahead. But I just never did do it.
Speaking about losing millions of dollars, you alluded to some investments that haven't really paid off over the years. I know I've talked to you about several quote-unquote opportunities that have been presented. Are poker players good businessmen?
No. No, of course, I'm really the sucker at it. I mean, I went looking for invested going looking for the Titanic, Noah's Ark. I've been in oil wells, race horses, fan cameras. So I didn't know you could put money in and never get anything back. Doyle room included, by the way.
Yeah. Have you ever made a big score in the business world as far as an investment that you've made?
No.
No?
Oh, I take that back. I did have a small piece of Jack Minion's riverboats.
Okay, that had to be good.
That was good, but it did make up for it.
Still stuck.
Oh yeah, and the biggest thing was a Christian TV station down in Alabama that I got hooked into that and couldn't get away. You've tried to quit poker games and everything,
Right.
but I tried to quit that, but we were in so deep we couldn't quit.
Chasing losses.
Yeah.
Just a few more questions, and we'll open it up for Q&A. We're going to be using the side microphones for questions for Doyle. Doyle, what do you want to be remembered for in the game of poker or for your life? What is going to be what do you want your legacy to be?
I'll say the truth. I think that I played longer at the higher limits than anybody ever did, and I think I have. I mean, Moss played till I think he died at 88, and he played until he died, but he left the higher limits when he was younger. So, and I've always played in the biggest games I could find, and I would like that, and the fact that I did try to promote poker. I think I would like for that to be my legacy.
And it will be, I'm sure. All right, can we take a couple of questions from the audience? Feel free to step on up to the microphones. We got about 15 minutes. Yeah, please.
Doyle, you have two terrific children that are following in your footsteps, Todd and Angela. And how did you feel about that? And to me, they've always been very successful in what they've done.
You mean Todd and Pam?
Todd and Pamela.
Yeah, Angela is Todd's wife, and she plays also, though. Todd was in pre-law at Texas Tech, and I had never said one word about poker. I mean, I'd never shown him anything about poker, and I didn't know that he played. And he came home, I think in his junior year, from Texas Tech, and said he wanted to be a professional poker player. Well, his mother threw a fit, and it kind of pleased me, but I had no idea that he was a capable player at this time. So I started taking him around with me, and I saw right away that he didn't know how to play. He won the tournament at the Bicycle when he was 21, and I think he is one of the better players in the world right now. If he would just put a little more time to it, I think he could be even better. And Pam she was the executive director of retirement homes, and she had never played poker. And she started playing on the internet, and she started winning tournaments. And I said, "What? And she said, "I won this, I won that." And I said, I couldn't believe it. And we had down at Doyle's room, it was the internet poker site that I represented, we had a bounty tournament. And I'd played in it every week for years, and I had never made the final table. And she not only made the final table, she won it twice. And then she started making last longer bets with Todd and myself in the World Series and some of the events, and she won every one of them. So she's a pretty good little player, not to have ever really got into it. So, I mean, I'm proud of him. Louise doesn't like it too much, but.
As a cancer survivor myself, I have a great appreciation for the bad beat on cancer and what you guys are doing. Of course, in the news now is the $1 million buy-in for One Drop next year. I was just wondering, Doyle, how do you feel about that being a bracelet event?
Good question.
I don't think it should count in
I agree.
the bracelet event. It's just like, I think the seniors is later today, right? I actually don't think they should give a bracelet for that. I've only played in one of them. I guess I've been a senior a long time. But I think it should be an open event to get a bracelet. And, obviously the youngsters can't play in the senior event, so I'm not going to play in it. Because I wrote enough heat about the small fields that if some of them, I won my bracelet, so I don't want to have to listen to that too.
Well, the One Drop thing is an open event. It's just $1 million buy-in, which makes it not
Oh,
so
yeah,
open.
you're right. It's it's going to limit the field, where the average player won't have an opportunity to play in it.
The average player with $1 million bankroll.
But it's for a good cause. I know that my wife has always had a a feeling for the water for the world. She drilled a lot of wells in India, water wells, through a Christian group of CBN, a broadcasting company, and I think she's got like 200 wells that she drilled in Europe, in India. So I appreciate Guy having that burden on his heart, because there's a lot of hurting people that don't have water to drink.
Yeah. There's a pad of paper. If you guys want to enter the drawing for the free mindset coaching, please write your email address and your name, and then pass it down, and we'll collect those at the end while we take the last 10 minutes of questions or so. Thank you for your question. Back here?
Hey.
Doyle, I just wanted to let you know as a fan how much I've appreciated getting to hear your life story and you opening up to the fans and sharing your life story. The Godfather of Poker is a great book. I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you would want to share a little bit of the stories with Tony Spilatro and the very fascinating mafia connection that you knew in some of those stories.
Well, I'm from Texas, and I wasn't really acquainted with what mafia meant. I mean, I'd heard about it and everything up east, but there wasn't anything like that in Texas, because in Texas, every town had a boss gambler, and he ran gambling in that town. And I don't think that an organized crime could come in there to his town and survive. I mean, have somebody up on every roof with a shotgun or something. But Tony Spilatro was he was a bona fide gangster. I mean, he was the toughest guy that I've ever known, and I didn't know it at the time. And I stood up to him in a lot of instances where maybe I should have been a little more discreet about it, but I didn't realize what really a bad guy he was. And but I do think he respected me for it, and he tried to get me involved in cheating in the card rooms, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And so he had a group that he had in the card rooms, and I had a lot of problems with him. And then, as I guess everybody knows that saw the movie Casino, that they finally the mob did kill him and bury him up in Indiana in a cornfield, him and his brother, while he was still alive. And they threw him in a hole. And I guess I've never been glad to hear somebody died until I heard that.
Thanks for your question. Over here?
My first name is Doyle, and I get a lot of attention because of you. My mother got it off the cleaners around the corner, and I was kind of wondering if you knew where your name came from.
I think it came from, I think it's an Old English name, maybe Irish English. I'm not sure. I've known a few Doyles, not very many, half a dozen maybe. So where did yours come from?
Well, Arthur Conan Doyle wrote Sherlock Holmes, and of course that's my last name is Doyle Holmes. And I thought she was some kind of literary person, but it turned out, like I said, it was from Doyle's Cleaners around the corner. But so that's, all right, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I have a two-part question. As you were growing up, being your poker star that you are, who were your people that you were looking to beat, like people are trying to beat you? And then if you could also address women now in poker and how you view that?
When I first started, Johnny Moss was the best poker player. I mean, people don't remember Moss because he was kind of older when he came to Las Vegas. He got exiled out of Las Vegas. They talk about the mob, all these stories about the mob and everything. I don't know how they sound to you guys, but he actually had to leave Las Vegas for about 20 years because of something that he was involved in. But so he kept the games going in Texas, and as a young pro, if I had a mentor, it was him. I kind of patterned my game after Johnny Moss. And as far as women goes, I used to previously didn't think that women should be at the poker table, but I've changed my mind because there's so many good women players now. There's really some good players. I mean, they're not just women, they're good poker players.
Did your daughter help change that?
Yeah, she did a little bit.
Yeah, now over the years, a lot of different forms of poker have kind of, like five-card stud used to be played a lot, now it's never played, and then right now the big one's no limit hold'em. What do you think in the future? What games are going to be more popular next year in the future, and what games are just about to die, like no one ever plays them anymore?
Well, it looks like hold'em is here to stay. It looks like it's going to remain the game of choice. Pot limit Omaha in Europe seems to be more popular. I think maybe lowball is going to have a comeback. It seems like people like the lowball games now, which is, by the way, is my favorite games too. Back when we played 2 games. We played no limit hold'em and no limit deuce to 7 lowball. So it's beginning to. That's what we're playing now at the Bellagio is the lowball games, and so I think maybe the lowball is going to come back, but I think hold'em will be the main game.
Perfect.
Mr. Brunson, I just want to tell you what a privilege it was to listen to you today. And I can't look down at a 10 deuce without thinking about you. I muck it, but I still think about you. I want to go back to your collegiate days when you were a star basketball player in college, and you had the unfortunate accident that busted up your legs really bad. Do you consider that a cursing or a blessing? Do you think you'd have been better off in the NBA or playing poker for a living?
Well, I'm probably better off playing poker. I have high aspirations when I was playing basketball. I lived and breathed basketball. That's the way I got to college, and they had to chase me out of the gym. I was a little bit ahead of my time there too, and the Lakers had already come down to draft me, but I was a junior and I had to play my senior year, and that's when I busted my leg. But I think it made a big change in my life. I would have been, if I hadn't broke my leg, I would be probably a school teacher somewhere.
Interesting.
You've played in a lot of the televised poker games, either tournaments or cash games like, the big game and whatnot. Did you find that those games that were set up for television are any different to play, or did the cameras distract you? You just pretty much forget about them?
No, I loved playing those things, the cash games. The tournament format I don't like, but the cash games, it's the young internet group that they're trying to make an impression on and they don't play really good poker, real solid poker. So they're taking a page out of my book, and there's no reason to try to be more aggressive than somebody that's deliberately trying to be more aggressive than you. I've always said that how you play is how your opponents dictate how you play. And so consequently, I get a lot of flack because I play these TV games kind of tight. But I know I won 15 times in a row on them. And I'm not an entertainer, I'm a poker player. These guys are trying to be entertainers. Thanks. I like your shirt, by the way.
Listen, Doyle, you talk about all these guys trying to break you in the tournaments. Can't you wear a disguise, like a long wig or something?
Be hard to disguise this leg, though.
Good morning, Mr. Brunson.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming today and sharing your knowledge with us. I read the biography on Stu Unger, and I remember a section of it where he spent some time with you and your family in your home, I believe in Texas. And so I believe that Stu won the main event 3 times. Do I have my stats correct?
Yep.
Do you feel if he was alive today that he could win it again? And do you believe that he would still be a dominant player if he was playing today?
Great question. Thank you.
Stu Unger was the best tournament player that I've ever played with. He was also one of the worst cash game players I've ever played with. He had his demons, and he just couldn't control them. And in cash games, when he got loser, he just went berserk. I mean, I've been around, a lot of language in my life, and words came out of his mouth that I've never heard before. I mean, he literally, if there's such a thing as demon possession, boy, he had it. And I loved him. I did my best with him. When he was at his worst, we took him to. I was living in El Paso right after my daughter had died, and I was in the process of trying to make my mind up about Christianity. And so I was studied it and everything. And my wife she's a devout Christian, and she took him down there, and she kept him for a month. And she got the Bible out. She taught him and talked to him every day, and he was just fine for that month. And he left, and he couldn't handle the pressure. I don't know what it was. He was a loss. I mean, he had the quickest mind of anybody I've ever known. I mean, he was just phenomenal. He was definitely the best gin player that ever lived. And I miss him. I miss him and Chip both still today.
Thank you. We have time for one more. All right, we don't have any more questions, so I'll leave the floor to you, Doyle. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. He wants one tip, Doyle.
Get lucky.
All right, guys. How about a nice standing applause for Doyle Brunson?
Thank you. Wow. Oh. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.